Hey, time to shine. Today, Varsity Podcast Squad. It's Scott Ferguson, and you are here to get your mind blown with a ton of knowledge nuggets from my friend Brian Czekanski from MindsetCopy.com. This gentleman is, for over a decade, there's a doubt in his voice that ran his life. It got so bad that he started avoiding situations of environments where the voice would be the loudest. Over time, he realized the huge impact that voice had in holding him back from living his life. What changed for him was learning that he wasn't alone. He started reading stories and hearing podcasts of others held back by the limiting voices in their heads. It led him to a huge light bulb. Long time reading of helping books, hiring a mindset coach, which changed everything for him. He left his very lucrative career on Wall Street that he never really enjoyed anyways, and finally discovered a life he'd always wanted. That path pointed Brian towards a career in direct response copywriting, a field where he could help mindset coaches connect with their dreams clients online so they can experience the same breakthroughs that he did. And I know that probably 20% of my listeners out there, my varsity squad, are coaches. So listen to the knowledge that Brian's about to drop on you. So Brian, if you could, introduce yourself to the Time to Shine Today podcast squad. But first, what is your favorite color and why?
Yeah, I got to feel like, hey, everybody, glad to meet you. I think for me, it was always the color red, because I always thought that was kind of my high school football uniform color. So always go back to kind of those high school football days and kind of just running around and having a lot of fun. So just kind of resonates in terms of those memories and those experiences. So that's kind of the connection there with that color.
This isn't on video, but Brian's pretty well put together. You can tell he played some ball back in his day if you just see him. So, well, anyways, welcome to the show, brother. Tell us, let's go back to this Wall Street working, kind of an origin story that kind of brought you forward, and elaborate on the introduction that I just gave you, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always worked in, I think growing up, I always had, going back to some of those limiting beliefs. I'm an introvert by nature. And I always kind of view that introvert, I always viewed being an introvert as kind of something that really held me back. So if you're not out there, you're not, well-spoken, and you're not talking a lot, I always viewed that as, okay, I'm a step behind here. So when I came out of school, I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew I kind of had to get over this. I always viewed as being an introvert as something that you need to get over. So I went right into kind of the place that would kind of make me the most uncomfortable, which was sales every day, getting in front of people, talking about different investments, talking about the retirement portfolios. As it went along, I did pretty, I got to the point where I was doing really well, got over some of that feeling of being uncomfortable. But the whole time I kind of knew that it wasn't the right fit for me. I kind of went into it for the wrong reasons. It paid pretty well, and it kind of improved my skills, but I knew it wasn't a direct fit for what I was, what I had a passion for and what my purpose was. And it just took a long time to kind of find that next step.
Gotcha. What was that aha moment that made it happen?
I think it was just a series of kind of going probably for about 4 or 5 years, kind of trying out different ideas, seeing what was out there. And I think for me, it was kind of recognizing that I could use some of those skills that I used, and I could work with businesses to kind of accelerate their sales, their progress in a more impactful way, and kind of sitting down with them, figuring out what their message is, finding out what their story is, and making them less of a commodity, making them less, making them more differentiated from all the other competitors that are out there. I think a lot of coaches and businesses feel like they're a commodity. And I think one of one of my main superpowers is kind of bringing forth, like, no, actually you have a story to tell that's differentiated. You have a unique perspective that the market appreciates if you're able to kind of tell it and share it, which, if you're telling your own story, that's, I think in my own respect, it's tough to tell your own story.
Sure.
It's actually very easy to tell somebody else's story. So that it makes it really easy to do it from an outside perspective.
Isn't that the truth? But isn't that funny? Like when you're telling somebody else's story, it's really your story in almost a sense. It's like you're almost living, like I wrote my book, and it was like I was almost living through the character, because I wrote a business parable. I was living through the character that's there. And a lot of the coaches, I'm sure, maybe you could agree or disagree, but a lot of them are actually living through other people instead of like projecting themselves. in
Yeah,
a
absolutely.
sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you hear somebody kind of tell their story, and you're kind of like picking up on like, wow, this really resonates with me. This is something that, and for me, I think the one of the aha moments for me was like, had a mentor that basically said, sit down and think about those stories that you find most uncomfortable to tell, like those stories that you don't want anybody else to hear. Like you need to write out those 4 or 5 stories, and if you release those to the public, you're going to find that those are the stories that you get the most engagement from. So think about that moment where you're the most scared, the most terrified. Think of an embarrassing moment that you had.
Sure.
I actually went through that exercise. It was probably 3 or 4 years ago. I went through that exercise, posted that stuff on social media, and you wouldn't believe kind of the response that I got. It was people basically from high school, 20 years that I hadn't talked to in 20 years,
Right.
reaching out and saying, you know, I saw your post and I just wanted to reach out and have a
Beautiful.
conversation. So it's crazy how some of that stuff that you don't want anybody else to know about, or those
Hmm.
thoughts in your head that you're just like nobody else has these thoughts.
Right.
They completely connect with that, and you kind of connect with them at a deeper level.
Yeah, and I can't wait till you write a book, because I actually was on your Facebook, and I think it might be your daughter that you wrote a nice long post about, and it's like, man, your writing actually flows, and man, be engaged and like really feeling it, man. That's awesome. So, Brian, what did your family think about you kind of walking away from a Wall Street career where you're getting that paycheck to start this company? Can you share with that if you don't mind?
Yeah, absolutely. They I think they continue to, and I think at the time thought it was crazy, kind of like he's like having, he's like having a midlife crisis or something, and he'll finally come back and he'll put together a resume and he'll finally find his way back to the regular 9 to 5. I think I always grew up in a family that, the only path was kind of working a 9 to 5 for 30 years, and then you retire, and then you find, you do a lot more traveling and things like that. So it was being an entrepreneur within a family where I've only had, my uncle owns his own company, but outside of that, everybody kind of follows that standard format. So I think definitely operating outside the norm of what they would expect, or how you earn money. So I think it's been a challenge, and I think an opportunity for me just to kind of change that mindset. And I've kind of had to change my own mindset as well about how I can go out there in the world and sell my own personal brand and not have, kind of a corporate flag behind you,
Love it.
supporting you. So
So, what do you feel makes a great coach? Because basically, you're a coach of a coach, right?
yeah.
So you bring in these coaches that are charging, some of them low ticket, some high ticket, you know, um, appearance fees, book writing, whatnot. Who comes into you? What do you think makes a great coach of a coach? Is there a secret sauce? Excuse me, that you think that you're finding that finds their blind spot where you would be needed?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that always have those first conversations is every coach tries to market their service to absolutely everybody. So they feel like if they're not selling their services to everybody, they're missing a chunk of business that they might not always have. So I think the first step for me is really kind of narrowing down, like, who do you actually want to work with? Who do you want to face off with on a day-to-day basis, and kind of convincing them that they have that opportunity. Like you don't have to allow the market to put those customers in front of her. You can kind of narrow down your market, figure out what the message is that resonates the most with them, and get business. And that's the best way to get business, because you're speaking directly to the thoughts in their head, their outcomes that they're looking for, that you go along. And I think one of the things that I always talk about with coaches is you're actually not selling your coaching services. You're selling those outcomes that your prospects want the most. So think about those outcomes that they want. The entire process of going through coaching isn't the most enjoyable thing for a prospect, but getting to that outcome that they want the most quickly and easily as they can, that's kind of the thing that they want the most. So you have to kind of think about that in your marketing, but also how you kind of sell your
So,
services as well.
so you're asking powerful questions to help them really niche in to what their ideal avatar of a client would be, then kind of go and market after that. Is that what you're kind of saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a scary thing for a lot of people,
Sure.
because they're worried about, like, okay, if I throw a message out there and it doesn't resonate, like, where does that leave me? Do I have to kind of start from square one and kind of expand my market? But I think you have to kind of realize that every Fortune 500 company starts by kind of niching down. Like Nike and Starbucks, they all started by finding kind of their those 1,000 raving fans that they have. Like
Sure.
Starbucks started as selling coffee beans to people in Seattle
Right.
before they started,
Even serving coffee, right?
yeah, exactly. They didn't even serve coffee. They didn't have those coffee shops to do that. So they started out with like 100 people, and they made those people really happy. They found out what their pain points were. They
Right.
found out what the outcomes they were, and they kind of just expanded that base. Same thing with Nike. They started out by serving
Showing up at track meets and stuff, right?
starting out with track meets, like college runners, and over time they expanded into basketball. Like they got those referrals from that initial base, and that's how
Right.
they slowly built it over time. They didn't go straight from selling
Right.
sneakers out of his he started by selling out of his like childhood
Car. Yeah, Phil
car
Knight
and
did.
bedroom.
Yeah.
And so there was kind of
Blue
that
Ribbon was the
process.
name of their first company, I think.
Yeah,
Blue
yeah,
Ribbon, yeah.
yeah.
That's
So
excellent. Hey, so if I'm at a networking event, I'm pressing some flesh. Well, we're not doing it right now, folks, because we're like in day 598 of our, quarantine. But if I'm at a networking event, pressing flesh, meeting some people, and I'm hearing some talk, you know, how will I know if someone, what's the keywords to hear that someone would be a good contact, prospect, or connection that I would want to introduce to you? What am I hearing?
yeah, I think it's kind of twofold. It's coaches that are, especially in this environment where in person meetings aren't possible, and they're thinking about their online space and saying, how do I even do this? Like, do I have to post on social media every single day to kind of get in front of my audience? So that's kind of one set that kind of is dependent on that in-person meetings at this point, and they're looking at this environment and saying, what am I going to do now? And then the other side is like those coaches that kind of have everything dialed in. They have their calendar pretty much full, but they just don't have a lot of time to focus on. They know they have to market their business. They know they have to see further growth, but they just don't have time in their calendar right now. And that's where I kind of come in, introduce some automation, some marketing automation that's going to help out their business, but also kind of take some of that stuff off their plate, whether it's email marketing or online ads to make their life a little bit easier, put in those investments that's going to get in front of their audience, that's going to resonate the most.
Beautiful, beautiful. So it's people that really are kind of lost in their growth in a sense that may need that direction to really niche in. Beautiful. Hey, Brian, let's get in our DeLorean with Marty McFly. Let's go back to the 22-year-old Brian, and you could talk to him right now. What would you tell him?
Yeah, I think for me, it's just like don't be so focused on those kind of material things. Like I was always worried about how much money I was going to make, and how much like kind of associating like how much money you make and how much of a worth of a person that you are. So kind of connecting that, like if I'm going to be successful, it's because I'm making 6 figures, 7 figures, whatever it is,
Right.
and kind of recognizing that stuff doesn't really matter as much. That if you kind of if you set up your approach and kind of go through life in the right way, a lot of that stuff will come back to you even without kind of focusing on it. So that's kind of how I set up my business, where I'm trying to deliver value as much as possible and not worrying as much about, okay, I need X number of clients this week and things like that. So I think just being a little less hyper focused on, kind of the thing, like how big my house was, like what car I drive, and what
Focus more
logo,
on serving others.
yeah, just like that connection, I think, is what I was really missing for a long period of time, kind of building those relationships, engaging with people, and knowing that those connections are really going to push me towards the direction that I need to, and kind of throwing out ideas along the way will help me find that thing that I want the most, or that career or that focus that I really wanted. By just taking action and moving towards that will kind of get you towards that path that you're looking for.
Love it. I think you'd actually listen. I
So
know that I probably would if you came back. Um, okay. You're dealing with a lot of coaches, and coaches, I deal with them too. We talked off air. Coaches, a lot of them have egos, and I'm sure that they're not ready to share with you when they first meet you. They don't want to be fully transparent because they're hiding behind that veil. Is there any good question that you wish the coach would ask you but never do?
I think I don't know. I think for me, those kind of initial conversations come to just kind of like talking things out. So I think
Sure.
for me, it's just kind of like, maybe it's, and I think it goes back to your kind of original question where maybe it's just kind of having a conversation where they ask the question about my story, and in me telling my story, I think that kind of helps them, allows them to kind of open up as well. And I think that's what I found. The more
Yeah.
it kind of goes back to, I'm a big improv fan. So it's kind of like
You got to listen to my last episode. I
yeah,
just
yeah,
posted it.
yeah. I just saw that
Yeah.
today. So I mean, it's
Yeah.
kind of like if you have to give a little bit of information to get some back, and I think
Sure.
that's what I found is if you can be vulnerable and open with people, they're going
Right.
to reciprocate in that way, and I think that's a great way to do it. Just because you have to kind of show people that it's kind of a safe space for them to be in, that they can kind of
Right.
share some of those deepest thoughts, but you have to be able to kind of share those deepest thoughts that you've had, those scary kind of uncomfortable moments to let people know that, okay, I'm not gonna go against you here. I'm not gonna make fun of you. I'm not gonna
Right.
throw that back in your face. So
I love it. That's great. You actually listen, because it's funny. The coaches, like I wish people just ask me, like, what's your story? And then when I bring them on, they're kind of interviewing me. Like, what's your story? How did you get to where you think that you are qualified to coach me? So
yeah,
like I never get asked that. It's weird. You almost have to tell them, and then you sound like you're bragging. But that's
yeah,
the one thing that I'll ask you. Be like, what
yeah,
makes you qualified? So that comes from being in 20 years of real estate, being asked,
yeah.
well, why should you be my realtor and stuff? So I get it. But all right, so let's take your cell phone, computer, laptop out of it. What's three things that Brian can't live without?
I think for me is number one being a dad. I think being I've got two little ones, a
Yay.
3-year-old and a 1-year-old, which obviously in this lockdown environment, presents its challenges. Um, I think the other one is kind of number two, like what we talked about, kind of that connection, building relationships over time. Always going out and having engaging conversations, meeting new people, finding out what their stories is. I kind of live on that every
Sure.
single day. And I think the third thing is like finding those, always doing new, finding new opportunities to do something new where I can kind of make myself uncomfortable. So I think a lot of that kind of goes back to improv. So I took improv, and then the next step was kind of musical improv.
Mhm.
So I was always really uncomfortable with singing, not because it was really just because I never really had a lot of experience. I always kind of viewed myself as either you're a good singer or you're a bad singer, or there's not really any too much in between. So
Right.
doing musical improv was like one of those things where I was like highly uncomfortable for a
Sure.
period of time, and then when I went through, it's become one of my most favorite things to do. And
Nice.
so that's kind of the gist there. So
Yeah, I'm kind of sucked into the improv thing too. I absolutely love it. It's changed so many things for me. It's fantastic. So, what is your definition of life well lived?
I think for me, it's just like having an impact on people's lives. I think that means different things to different people, obviously. But I think it's again going back to kind of the relationships that you form, the connections that you've had, and kind of finding your own perspective in terms of how you can have that impact. And for people that might be just helping others in terms of community service. It might be having an impact through your career, but kind of just finding what that means to you. And for me, it's just being able to kind of help mindset coaches find that find their kind of true dream clients, and being able to kind of have that impact. And for me, being able to see that people's actual lives are being changed is something that and for them to kind of avoid a lot of the things that I went through, and kind of get through that in a faster period of time is pretty meaningful for me.
I love it. I love that. So yeah, love to have the impact. That's a total go giver right there. So we're gonna move into our level up lightning round. You got like 5 to 7 seconds to answer these. Don't elaborate. You and I could talk for 30, 40 minutes on each one of these, but we're going to roll through these with our lightning round. You ready, Brian?
Absolutely.
Awesome. What's the best leveling up advice you've ever received?
I think it's for me. It's surrendering to those opportunities that come in front of you.
Love it. Share one of your personal habits that contributes to your success.
I drink a 16-ounce fruit smoothie every morning.
Really?
Yeah.
Beautiful. Other than your website, mindsetcopy.com, and of course, timetoshinetoday.com, my shameless plug, what's another website that you like to level up and go to?
In the last week, I've used a application called Toggle, which allows you to kind of look at your time frame and kind of see where you're putting your time, which
That's
obviously is
awesome.
very important. Yeah.
So, not the flavor of the week book, not the flavor of the month. What's your go-to book?
The one I read recently is called The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer.
Okay.
Uh, so
Is that your favorite book?
I think for one of the favorite books kind of goes back to it's called The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. I think it
Oh
goes
yeah,
back to
wrote the
kind of
Daily Stoic. I read it
yeah,
every
yeah,
single
yeah.
day.
So
Love that.
I love all of his stuff, and I think a lot of that stuff kind of in the time that I read it, and I think to the time now, it kind of has gotten me to the point where being an entrepreneur and kind of getting through. Obviously, being an entrepreneur and a business owner, you always
Sure.
have those obstacles that come through almost on a weekly or daily basis, and
Right.
not being able to kind of manage through them and finding solutions for that and not being knocked down by them and actually anticipating them and saying bring it on a little bit
Okay.
has been kind of key to my mindset and finding some success.
So your favorite charity or organization you like to contribute your time and or money to?
I think for me it's St. Jude. Kind of goes back
There you go.
to
The children.
children. So
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to ask this. I've been throwing this in because of our COVID situation right now. If you could go anywhere right now, where would you go? Make it quick. It has to be top of your head.
I would go to Majorca, so just get some beach time in, get some
No,
sunshine.
love it. Last question. What is the best decade of music? 60s, 70s, 80s, or 90s?
I love the '90s. Love what they're putting out there.
Awesome, brother. Awesome. So leave our Time to Shine Today squad with one last knowledge nugget you want them to take with them.
Yeah, I think it's realizing that you have in your story, you have a lot of things that people need to hear, and you have to realize that there's a lot of value in your story. And if you can kind of share those uncomfortable moments and some of those key moments, they don't have to be life-changing moments. Some of those smaller moments are really what people need to hear. And if you put those out there, you'll find your tribe that really resonates with what you're doing, and they'll come and find you.
Love it. All right. Where can we find you, Brian?
So for me, the two main ones are Facebook and LinkedIn. So obviously, just Brian Czekanski for each of those, and the website is mindsetcopy.com.
Love it that you got that URL. That's solid. That's a solid get right there. Awesome. Awesome. So, squad, we've just got dropped some serious knowledge nuggets on us by my friend Brian Czekanski. He believes in making an impact on people's lives. Share the small moments with your tribe if you're a coach out there, because believe it or not, those a lot of times will matter the most. And then find your most uncomfortable story to tell and share it because people want to hear it. All right. So Brian is very humble. He's very hungry. He levels up his health. He levels up his wealth. And Brian, we're so stoked that you took your time and came on and talked to the Time to Shine squad. And now you're part of us now, so you can't get rid of us.
I appreciate it, Scott.
Have a great day, brother.
Thanks.